Welcome to Aging Insight with your host, John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. This program is brought to you by Heritage Home Health, Ameriprise Financial, Better Hearing Care, Learning RX, Windsor Cottage, Red River Federal Credit Union, Wadley Senior Clinic, Home Care Assistance, Texarkana Hospice, Alzheimer's Alliance.
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I'm John Ross, your host, and I'm here with Lisa Schollmeyer, and we are elder law attorneys. We're attorneys who try to address the needs of seniors, people with disabilities, trying basically to address the type of concerns that we see people have, concerns like staying out of a nursing home if they can avoid it, concerns like becoming a burden on their friends or family, and concerns like avoiding going broke as you get older and trying to pay for yourself. We know that if we can give you the right information, the kind of information that will help you navigate through the years between retirement and the end of life, with the right information you can accomplish those goals, but you've got to have the information. And so that's why we're here, that's why we do this program, and we feel very strongly about this message.
Yeah, you know, John, I always tell folks when I'm out in the community speaking that life gets more complicated as you get older. I mean, you would think it would get, you know, simpler. You've raised your kids, you worked your job, you've retired, but yet, you know, our seniors are simply bombarded with complexity, whether that's, you know, open enrollment for Medicare or estate planning decisions and protecting and caring for the next generation, but it just gets more complicated.
Well, and not only does it get more complicated, but in the process of getting complicated, you're also faced with health problems that become housing problems, and housing problems that become financial problems, all combined with navigating this very complex little path. And in a previous episode, we talked about the importance of the general durable power of attorney for making business-type decisions if you get to a point where you can't make them for yourself.
Right, we talked about that being a document in which you yourself are selecting the agent and the person you want to handle your business if there ever comes a time that you can't.
Right, but one of the points with that was that the general durable power of attorney, if, and notice I say if, that power of attorney is drafted correctly, the person that you've appointed will be able to handle just about anything for you except medical decisions. And so today's topic and today's issue is going to be medical directives. And that term, medical directives, encompasses several different things. Things like a medical power of attorney, HIPAA releases, advanced directives like a directive to physicians, which is also known as a living will, and also a DNR, or a Do Not Resuscitate order, all come under the category of medical directives.
Right, so, you know, a lot of times people think that their spouse can just, you know, if they get into a position where they can't make medical decisions, or if they need information out of their medical file, that their spouse can just go get it or make those decisions, and that's not exactly the case.
Right, and what you want to do, there could become a time, for example, if you were in an automobile accident, if you were to have a stroke, you might be at the hospital, you might be in a situation where you need some sort of surgery. Perhaps this surgery is dangerous, but it could be life-saving. So if you get the surgery, you could live, and if you don't get it, it's possible that you die, but you're unconscious. You're unable to consent to that surgery. You want somebody else to be able to make that decision for you, and you want to know who that person is well ahead of time.
That's right. So I guess, John, let's break down the different medical directives that we're talking about today, and let's kind of take them one at a time. And I guess since we talked about a general durable power of attorney for business purposes in our last episode, let's start with the medical power of attorney.
Right. Well, the medical power of attorney, again, same concept, but what we're talking about here is a document that says who you want to make decisions for you if you cannot make them for yourself. Now, if you were paying real close attention to my words, you heard something in there. This is for you if you cannot make the decision for yourself.
Yeah, that's right, because when we're talking about a medical power of attorney, the patient always has the ability to make their own decisions. And, you know, a medical power of attorney only comes into play at the time where the patient, him or herself, is either unconscious, and so clearly you're in no position to make a decision, or you really are unable to process the information and to have the judgment to make that medical decision, such as a person who has advanced dementia or Alzheimer's.
Right. You know, a lot of times when I'm talking to people out there, you know, they'll say, John, I'm not going to sign that power of attorney, medical power of attorney, because if I sign that, my kids are going to put me in the nursing home.
Right. We do get that quite a bit.
So I want to be very clear. You're not giving up any of your own personal rights by signing a medical power of attorney. All you're doing is saying that if you can't make that decision, here's who you want to make it for you. And oftentimes I use kind of an example, and it's an extreme example, but one of the things that I'll say is, well, imagine that I had a power of attorney, and let's say that I've appointed you, Lisa, as my agent under my medical power of attorney. And all of a sudden, I've gotten a bad diagnosis. I've got something that could kill me. It's a bad disease. It could kill me. But there's a magic pill. And if I take the magic pill, I will live. And if I don't take the magic pill, I will die. And I don't want to take it. Well, you're my medical power of attorney. Can't you force me to take it?
Yeah, if you're assuming that, I want,
right, of course.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm assuming that you would want to, but the point is no.
Yeah, as your agent under medical power of attorney, I cannot substitute my decision for your decision.
Right, it's my decision. I get to make that. I get to determine when and how I want my own medical care. But let's change those facts, and let's say that I'm unconscious. And so I cannot communicate to that doctor whether or not I would want that magic pill. I want to know who's going to decide for me. And I need to do that in writing, and I do that in a medical power of attorney.
Right. I tell clients all the time, like with your example with the magic pill, I tell clients all the time, hey, if you can blink once for yes and twice for no, that is communication. And assuming that, you can listen and understand what's going on, then we can ask you what decision you want. But yes, otherwise, if you're unconscious, we need to have someone in place that you trust, that knows what your requirements would be, what your choices would be, and you want that person making that decision. Once again, this is a document you need to sign and think about and execute ahead of the time that you need it, because clearly this is a document that at the point that you need it, there's nobody, you are not going to be able to communicate that. So that's the medical power of attorney. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll talk about the other medical directives.
The facts behind brain training. Science proves that the brain can be changed. Training key skills can improve ADHD and attention issues. Learning RX Brain Training delivers real change to students of all ages. Train the brain, get smarter, guaranteed. Learning RX.
Hi, I'm Blake Rich. Heritage Home Health and Heritage Hospice is a realization of my dream of bringing exceptional home care to the people of Texarkana, Texas, and the surrounding areas.
The love and compassion of Jesus Christ gives our work purpose.
Their dignity is important to us. We respect the fact that they choose us and honored to be given that opportunity.
Love, dignity, respect.
We are Heritage Home Health and Hospice.
Windsor Cottage offers a home environment with available assistance. Our mission is to provide ultimate care through dedication and personal attention. Residents enjoy the opportunity to continue their independent lifestyle with dignity. They thrive as they're able to live without the pressures of the hustle and bustle of daily living. Windsor Cottage is committed to a family atmosphere where residents can enjoy companionship and the pleasures of daily activities. At Windsor Cottage, we live the difference.
Welcome back, everybody, to today's edition of Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer, and I'm here today with my partner, John Ross, and we are local attorneys, and we practice in the area of elder law. And what that means is we focus on folks who have their individualized needs, and we pull from a lot of different areas of the law to try to find solutions, particularly for seniors and the disabled. Today's program is about medical directives, and our first segment today we've talked about healthcare powers of attorney, medical powers of attorney, and now we want to talk about, let's talk about that directive to physicians, or also known as a living will. And this document is also something, it's very personal. And John, why don't you tell our audience what this document is about?
Well, you know, the living will, it gets its name from a law student who was writing a paper back in the 60s, and he said that there ought to be a will, which covers how you want your stuff to go when you die, that there ought to be a will for while you're alive that doesn't say what you want to happen after your death, but says how you want to die. And that's where the name living will comes from. Well, since then, it's gotten lots of different names. Directive to physicians, advanced directive, living will. There's lots of different names for it. But this is the document that says, once the doctors have determined that you're going to die, but they could keep you alive with things like breathing machines, feeding tubes, all sorts of medical type stuff that could prolong your life, but you have no hope of getting any better.
Right, and then what selections would you want, and how would you want your health care to be handled in that situation where it is for sure 100% that you're in a terminal situation, terminal condition, whatever medical situation you're dealing with is going to cause your death. A lot of times we think about that in terms of cancer diagnosis or advanced other diseases, and this is you being able to set the tone for what kind of care you want.
That's right. And so essentially what we're talking about here is that if you want to live with breathing machines and feeding tubes, that's fine, but it needs to be in writing, so that you can communicate that decision to the people around you. If you don't want to live like that, that's fine, but it still needs to be in writing. Either way, you're putting into writing, this is the last decision you'll ever make. And you want to make it, because there's a big difference between you making that decision and pushing that decision onto somebody you love.
Right, and really that's what this document is for. It is so that you are taking that burden off of that loved one, either way. So often this also gives you an opportunity as you consider making a living will, having that conversation with your loved ones about what you do and do not want. But again, we want to get it in writing.
Right, and it doesn't even have to be just about medical stuff. I had a client one time, and she said that she didn't want any sort of life support or anything like that. She wanted to die naturally, give her some pain medicine to keep her comfortable. But as she died, she wanted somebody to hold her hand, and she wanted somebody to read to her The Velveteen Rabbit, which is a children's book, and it was her favorite children's book from when she was younger, and that was how she wanted to die. And, you know, she did die, but we all do. And but knowing how she wanted to die gave her family some comfort to let them deal with that transition, and they were not forced to have to make that decision themselves. So it's very important, this living will.
Well, and the other thing is, when you're considering a living will, you also want to talk to your physicians, because, you know, John, we have read research and looked at this, and you know, when they ask physicians as a group what kind of end-of-life care they want, their answers are often very different than the general population. You know, for instance, CPR. That is something that the general population says that they definitely want, you know, CPR, even if they're in that terminal condition. Physicians, shockingly, have a very different answer.
Right, and so there's a big difference between what the doctors say, what individuals say, and a lot of times it's because we as lay folks out here, we don't really understand the type of medical care. You know, all I know about CPR is what I get from watching TV shows. And they've done studies, and on those TV shows, 75% of the time when somebody does CPR, they make a full recovery. And in reality, it's like 3%. And the doctors know that. And so that's why the doctors say they don't want CPR. And so this is not necessarily a legal decision. It's a medical decision. It's a personal decision that once you make that decision, the legal part becomes putting it in writing and doing it the correct way.
That's right. You know, we live in an amazing time with a lot of medical advances, and so this is something to discuss with your physician, but get it in writing.
Right. And don't confuse this particular document, the living will, with the DNR.
Which the DNR stands for Do Not Resuscitate. And I believe we'll go ahead and take our break, John, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the difference between a living will and a DNR.
Our children were the first to notice that my husband needed in-home care. Being his full-time caregiver was becoming very difficult for me, physically and emotionally. And we would never dream of moving him outside our home of 40 years. That's when we called Home Care Assistance. With Home Care Assistance, I know I can reach a care manager 24 hours a day.
Schedule your free in-home assessment at 1-866-4-LIVE-IN.
The facts behind brain training. Science proves that the brain can be changed. Training key skills can improve ADHD and attention issues. Learning RX brain training delivers real change to students of all ages. Train the brain, get smarter, guaranteed. Learning RX.
As things get older, they require more care. This car and I have seen a lot of miles together. But because I take care of her, she runs just like she did in 1955. That's why I chose the Wadley Senior Clinic, with an individualized care plan designed just for me and a convenient location off Jefferson Avenue. They have everything to keep me running like new. It's not about the miles, it's about the journey. Let the Wadley Senior Clinic keep you happy, healthy, and cruising down the road of life.
Welcome back to Aging Insight, everybody. I'm John Ross. I'm here with Lisa Schulmeyer, and today we're talking about medical directives. We opened the program talking about the medical power of attorney, and then we talked about the living will. And one thing about the living will, a lot of times when I mention the living will, people will say, I'm not interested in signing one of those living wills, because if I sign that and I start choking on my dinner, they won't even give me the Heimlich maneuver, because they're gonna let me die. They're not going to try to save my life at all. Is that what a living will does, Lisa?
Yeah, no, not at all. And I've heard that before as well, worried about that they won't get every medical intervention. But the bottom line is a living will is just for that situation when we're at that terminal point. It's not for, just your hospital stay where you've had a health event and you are needing that more intense medical care, but you're expected to make a good recovery. That's not what we're talking about, where that living will only comes into play at that extreme end of life situation.
Right. But what these people are confusing is the difference between the living will and a do not resuscitate order, or also known as a DNR.
Well,
and that's the one that says, I don't want any sort of life-saving procedures whatsoever.
right, and of course, you know, the one difference between a living will, which is a document that you as an individual sign and you indicate what kind of care you want at that terminal stage in your life, and a DNR is, you know what, a DNR is something that your physician has to sign off on.
Right, it's a document between you and your primary care doctor or your treating physician, and it's signed by both of you, whereas the living will is just something that's signed by you and either witnessed by two witnesses or perhaps notarized, depending on which side of the state line you live on.
Well, and the other difference between a living will and a DNR, you know, and a living will situation, maybe it looks like your disease process is terminal and you know, death may be imminent, but in that, and you're just describing what type of care you want, comfort care, pain medication, that type thing. But with the DNR, we're talking about a situation where you have, in fact, sometimes they use the term coded, or you have come to a point where you need resuscitation. You know, we're not just talking about care, we're talking about the need for resuscitation. And so a DNR covers the situation to where you're saying that you don't want resuscitation.
That's right. And so they are two different things. Pretty much everybody needs some form of living will. You need to decide how you want to be treated at the end of life. But only a select group actually need a DNR. That's a very specific thing for a very specific type of situation. The living will is much broader for everybody else out there.
Well, that's right. Another reason that you would need a living will is that, you know, the reason that everyone needs one is because, unfortunately, you know, you might be in an accident or something that suddenly puts you into that terminal or vegetative condition, and, you know, once again, take that burden off your family, and and have that decision already made for them.
Right. Now, there's one other piece to all of this, and that is there's a federal law out there called HIPAA, and it stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. But what that law is the one that says nobody, and when I say nobody, I mean nobody, not your spouse, not your kids, nobody has access to your medical information without your signed, written permission. And so it doesn't do anybody any good to be able to make a medical decision for you, to be able to talk to the doctors for you, or any of that if they can't access the medical records. So the last kind of key to all of this is what's called a HIPAA release. Something that says, okay, I've appointed this person as my medical power of attorney, but they also have access to my medical records under this federal law called HIPAA.
Well, and people are very familiar with HIPAA in the sense that it seems like every time you go to the doctor's office, they hand you a clipboard and it's got, you know, making sure you've been advised of our HIPAA privacy policy. And the doctor's offices are doing that because they have to be in compliance with this federal law. So making sure you have a HIPAA release signed that could go to any doctor's offices or any medical facility is a way to make sure the people that care about you can get information about you, you know, whether it's here locally or whether you're at MD Anderson or some other facility. The other part of this is a HIPAA release is necessary if you want to have your son or daughter pick up your prescription at the pharmacy. Then, you know, the fact that you're taking a specific type of medication is in fact medical information.
Right.
So your pharmacy is going to want to have a HIPAA release so that your family member or friend could pick up your prescriptions.
Right. So you know, we've talked about the medical power of attorney, the HIPAA release, the living will, and compared that living will to the DNR. all things that are very important. Now, I want to make one little last comparison here between the general durable power of attorney. That general durable power of attorney, the one for business, that is a very important, very specific legal document. It should only be prepared by a professional and somebody who knows what they're doing. It is not a simple document, and nobody should consider it a simple document. The medical powers of attorney are a bit more flexible. And even better for the people out there is there's a federal law that requires every healthcare provider out there, hospitals, nursing homes, things like that, to provide you a medical power of attorney and a living will free of charge. So you can get those things out there in the community. Now, be careful. Make sure that they have things like HIPAA releases built in with them. But there are tools out there where you can get some of these things without having to pay for it, because there are free sources out there.
Right, and that's what Aging Insight is about, is getting you that information and connecting you with resources so that you can get these tools in place.
That's right. And so we encourage you to keep listening to the program as we talk about these topics. If you have questions, feel free to put those questions up on the internet on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Aging Insight. You can also call us. We're live on the radio, 107.1 every Saturday at noon, and you can call us there. And also feel free to check out our magazine, which is Aging Insight. It can be found in most of your local doctor's offices and places like that.
All right, well, John, and finally, I just want to say that, whomever you might select as an agent under, whether it's a medical power of attorney or the durable power of attorney for business, there's no right or wrong answers. There's no requirements that it be your child or your spouse, and it could be different individuals that have, you may have a child that's an RN and a child that's an accountant. That would be great. So it's very personal decisions, and that's what we want to do, is give you the tools to make them for yourself.
Right, and ultimately do them in a way that helps you out the best. So keep watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Aging Insight program with John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. This program is made possible by Heritage Home Health, Ameriprise Financial, Better Hearing Care, Learning RX, Windsor Cottage, Red River Federal Credit Union, Wadley Senior Clinic, Home Care Assistance, Texarkana Hospice, Alzheimer's Alliance,